Hey, everybody. I'm joined once again by Andy Talaga. Say hello, Andy.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. I've come to you tonight with a philosophical question, a
Okay.
question for the ages that all collectors wrestle with. So, I have completed my Star Wars CCG set. I have nothing left to collect. I have the black border sets, which is where I started. Then I went to the AIs, and then I went to the foils, and then I got a couple of the ultra rares times two or three. Right? We don't need to say which ones. I'm not hoarding, but I have enough. And then I went and got the oversized cards, and I got the white border sets.
Skywalker Jedi Knight.
Yeah, yeah, but I've done it, right? And I've done it for a little while now, and maybe this was 6 months ago. I completed the collection. The oversized cards were the last things for me to get, and I've been wrestling with this question of what do you do now, right? Like the fun of collecting is the collecting, right? That's if everything. This is I was talking with another friend about this. If this stuff was only if Japanese Hoth was $10 a pack, it would be sitting there because people wouldn't perceive it as valuable and therefore they wouldn't want it, right? If this was an easy journey to buy into this, then you probably wouldn't want it. And that's sort of like what creates this psychological effect of demand and then also like the supply that then tightens up because people demand it more. So I've been wrestling with this and I wanted to pose the question to you. You finish collecting it, you have your master set. What now?
Sure. It's an interesting question. I think reminds me of a couple of things that have come up recently in my Star Wars CCG sphere, we'll say. One was your recent video that you posted. Actually, I don't know when you're posting this video, but recently to when we're recording this video, you posted an interview with Scott Church, owner of Category 1 Games, great guy. And you talked a little bit about this. So, we'll probably expand on that. And it kind of got my mind thinking about this same topic, but also maybe about it's middle of July 2020 right now when we're recording this. So it's probably like in May of 2022. Did I say 2020? 2022. Sorry. Years of COVID have taken.
No, COVID is like it's flattened my brain completely. So just you free pass.
Yeah. And probably about May, there's this guy in the UK. His name's Ian Fletcher, big time Star Wars CCG collector. He's got a lot of crazy stuff. If you think I'm a black hole, he's definitely a black hole. But he posed a question, which was I forget the exact wording of it, but it was to the effect of I own everything for Star Wars CCG. What should I do now? So it's something that I think I've been pondering about even myself as I've basically come to the end of my collection as well.
It is a journey, right? And it's like the end of the journey. There's a guy in Norway, Bjorn, who pretty much got to a near complete collection. He's like, well, I'll never be able to get the last two Japanese sets. I'm just going to sell it all, right? I think at the end of the journey, that is the result. It's like, okay, I wanted to collect it. I succeeded in collecting it or nearly. And now I just want to get rid of it, right?
Yeah, I think, perfect example is Bjorn, where I think there's two types of collectors. There's people who enjoy the journey and they want to write the Red Book of West March at the end with Bilbo Baggins at the end of their journey. And then there's people, and they get enjoyment of collecting for finding the stuff. And then there's collectors who, they probably get, and these are a little bit interchangeable, of course, or probably a lot interchangeable. There's collectors who have enjoyment of owning everything. Those two things are very slightly different, right? Where it's in Bjorn's case, is probably the hunt for the product, finding all the boxes, having it all. Okay, I've got it all. I can say that at one point in my life I've owned this. I can get rid of it. And there's people who are I've got it all, and I derive enjoyment from owning it and looking at it every day, and it's never going to leave my possession.
Right.
That's slightly different.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to characterize it. And, I think I might be in that first camp. I'm not I've not thought about selling my cards seriously, but I have looked in the closet and seen some of the sealed product I have, and I'm like, do I need a box of Coruscant, right? Like, what if there was a house fire? How would I ever tell someone that I swear I have a box that's worth $2,500 of like these vintage cards? And so I think like within that, like I think I'm in the first bucket, and I've been like soul searching. I mean, it gives me joy to look in the closet and see these things. And I did buy like the little acrylic cases for each of the boxes, and that gave me joy to like assemble the little like hermetically sealed plastic cases for each of them. And like weird things about collecting give me joy, like having like things in top loaders, or I bought a bunch of those like big like the .9 thick ones. I'm like, it's displaying it, $200 on binders so that the side loading, but then it's done, and you're like, okay, well, that was a fun project. What's next? It's always what's next in collecting, and that's the meditative part of it as well.
Being, I think,
Right.
and for me, I guess in camp 2, I want to own it. I want to have it. I want to hoard it. Not hoard it. You can't really hoard Japanese hot boxes. I guess I am technically. I own one. So
yeah, you're the problem. You're the cause of the shortage.
and so again, it's displaying it. I've got really nice display case coming in now. It's been a year in making from Singapore. It should be here in August. So I will finally get my museum up and running. And I joke that it's a museum, but that's really something that I want to be able to have, is like my own little private museum of stuff that really gives me a lot of joy to look at. And I think that for me, it's about keeping it all.
Interesting.
At the end of the day, I pretty much have everything. So where to go?
Yeah. So philosophically, do you think that like if these cards were worth, let's say, a fraction of what they are, would you want to have this museum? Like, it's one of the reasons you want to have this stuff is because it is rare or hard to find, or perceived as valuable, or is it just like this is nostalgic, and even if this is only worth $100, I just want to have it because it's important to me?
If I said Camp 1 was it's rare, so I want to have it, and Camp 2 was the nostalgia, I'm firmly in Camp 2 there. So I had a really incredible foiled Japanese Magic collection. Um, and for a long time, I played Magic, played competitively, Grand Prix. I went to 4 different continents to play, high level Magic. I was on different teams and playing and stuff, and it just didn't. The playing of the game was a lot of fun and gave me a lot of happiness, and playing with friends, teammates and stuff. But like owning the cards ultimately just really wasn't doing anything for me. But they were like really expensive, like foil Japanese blue deltas from Onslaught are like $6,000 a piece. I had a bunch of those. I sold a ton of cards off recently from Magic to basically buy into things that I really enjoyed, like Star Wars CCG, because that's, you want to talk about 20-year cycles of nostalgia. That was my teenage years roughly.
Yep.
CCG in 1995 with Premiere, and I played all the way through till my last tournament was Dragon Con 2001 in Atlanta, when it was Premiere through Coruscant. My mom, that was right after 9/11, and my mom, I was like 17 at the time, she refused to let me fly to Freedom Con down in Florida, or wherever they were holding Freedom Con that year, maybe it was in Norfolk. And she was sure that I was going to be killed in an airplane crash. I hope the YouTube censor. But she refused to let me play, so I never actually played in a tournament with Reflections 3 or Theed Palace, because basically that was the end of the game. So, but for me, basically from like whatever I was, like 12 through 17 or 11 through like 17, like that was my life was Star Wars CCG, going to tournaments every weekend, playing. traveling with the same group of guys from Philly plus Kim Caton, so group of guys plus one lady, um, all over through Coruscant region, Kashyyyk region, Yavin 4, Dagobah, all the way out to the Midwest. Go to opens, cons, everything. Like that was every weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday was a tournament or practice or play with them. Like, so getting back into the game for me, it's all nostalgia driven. Yes, having a box of Japanese Hoth that's probably $15,000 is great, but I mean, I had Magic cards that were $15,000 a piece, and like, who cares, right? I mean,
Yeah.
at a certain point, it really skews your brain as to like what the value of something is, because you're just like, you have like no problem going to a convention and being like, yeah, I need to get a Beta Tropical Island. Here's $13,000, and just like link about it. And then like you'll hear people who are like, it's always like really bizarre for me when I talk to people at like work or something like that, and they're like, oh, my hobby, like one guy in my work, he's really into like bike riding. And he's like, yeah, my hobby, bike riding, bike riding, bike riding. And I'm like, oh yeah, really? And he's like, yeah, my wife's gonna kill me. I just spent $800 for a bike. And they're like, yeah, that name of that like little monkey guy, like looking and looking.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like I just don't say anything.
$800, like, dude, like the land base in my Magic deck isn't like $800, like 4 cards in my deck. Like, what are you talking about? I have 180,000 Magic cards in my house. Like,
I just pray there's never a flood in your house.
use the ability for you to like rationalize pricing,
Yeah.
which getting out of Magic has really kind of brought me back into like normal pricing things where I'm just like, oh, this is like $300. That's a lot of money, but like $300 isn't really like that much money when it comes to collectibles. Um, so for me, I'm firmly in the nostalgia camp. Like, I don't collect things just because they're expensive and rare. There's an appeal to that for me. But I collect things because I really want to enjoy them as something that I can look back on fondly on. So, like, a perfect example for me is I collect Versus System, which is the Marvel DC CCG, and there are definitely the first off, Versus System has a lot more cards than Star Wars CCG that are like multiple hundreds of dollars in foil and stuff like that. Like, probably the top end of Star Wars Darth Maul Young Apprentice is more than any one Versus System card is, but Versus System has like hundreds of cards that are like each hundreds of dollars. So there is an endless rabbit hole there, which I think will be probably a theme of things to do after you collect, which is collecting is an endless rabbit hole. But like for me, Versus System, that's all nostalgia driven from playing Versus back in like 04, 05 time. And
I mean, nostalgia is a
lot of it is not value driven, but it's driven off of, I really enjoyed this game.
Well, I think part of it's also driven off of when you find that community of collectors or players slash collectors, it is also a bit of like keeping up with the Joneses a little bit, right? Where it's like having a foil deck or having, whatever, like you want to be able to show off your like shelfie or whatever it is to say like, see what I have, right? And not like in a braggadocious way, but like, hey, I'm really proud of this thing that I just got into my collection. As you were kind of talking, I was thinking about, I'm definitely more in camp one as far as, I collect because things are valuable, but this game is also of immense nostalgic. I mean, if it was just collecting valuable things, then like there's many other things, including my mom's Beanie Baby collection, which I'm dreading opening up.
Thing. Like,
Right. So I did, I had a similar story kind of growing up playing this game. I think the key difference is I was always like, me and my friends were bad and we would go to these tournaments and get like murdered. So like we didn't have a super positive playing experience because I think I was more like, oh, that's the 12-year-old kid that got some of this stuff for Christmas and doesn't really know what he's doing and just got like destroyed by the college students. And so I didn't have a super positive playing experience, right? Like it was fun, but I'd leave a tournament and be like, I went 1-5, right? And they give me some like pity prizes. Um, so I think for me, like, coming back to it, I almost wanted to initially just own the stuff I could never buy, right? Like, yeah, I got a box of blank for Christmas or something, but I never really had the funds to make serious investments in the game. When I was sort of like playing in like, the let's say 12 to 15 range or something, right? Um, and now, like, that was the initial thing coming back as a collector. Like, okay, I want to have this because I couldn't have this as a kid, and now it turns out I have a job, so I can buy things I like. And this is something I like. I think that the aesthetics are attractive, right? It looks good. It's a solid game, and that's what kind of kept me here. But it's just about finding rare things, and I would probably just have hundreds of Darth Mauls, right? But there's something we said about also like having it complete and that feeling of satisfaction when something's complete. Um, but one thing I've done, I've kind of moved, and I've hinted at this a little bit in the channel, but you do find new like sub like communities of communities. And so I've moved into like sign stuff, which I think is just really interesting. So I have next to me some of my signed cards, and this is probably my favorite one. This is a signed Gold 5 by Jim Colson. so, but like just finding these actors, I mean, here's a Jeremy Bullock, right? Like this is to me, I think these are valuable, but I also think they're just interesting artifacts, right? And as the actors continue to die off, I think that it's interesting to have these sort of pieces. And the signature market's also just really interesting space. It's very like interactive, and finding that community, I think, also once again like fuels the inner collector, because then you're like, oh, I have this signed, oh, I got that signed, right? And so it does help sort of create like a sense of positive reinforcement where you're not just collecting these things in a void. They don't just go to your basement. You're collecting it, and then you get to talk to your friend who also is collecting it, right? And they can't believe you got it. It is reminiscent almost of being like 15, 16 again, right? Where it's like we're all on the hunt for Imperial class Star Destroyer foils, right? Like everybody's on the hunt. And if someone found one, like everyone's just kind of happy for them because they found it, and not like, there's a little bit of jealousy, but it's like, that's so great you found it, man. So anyways, I think that signatures though and autographs are like a really interesting, that's like what has caught my attention most recently. And I mean, you want to talk about like collecting endlessly, like every, like, you can get like set designers, you can get like the guy who created Chewbacca's costume, right? Like just endless. Right, yeah, exactly. It's like, different puppeteers. Admiral Akbar, I have two Akbars. One is the voice and one is the puppeteer. So it's like, there's lots of like ways you can think about it. But I think, anyone that's interested that's reached a similar point, I would say that autographs have been a really good outlet for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that go that route, and probably we'll circle back to autos in a little bit. With one of the points that I'll make about where to go with collecting. But for me, with collecting, like once I had all the cards, master sets, Japanese sets, whiteboard sets, oversized cards, foils, ultra rares, blah blah blah, I started collecting decks. So like I build my favorite deck from Premiere through Haw in real cards, and now I have that deck. I build my favorite deck for Premiere through Death Star 2, and I have that deck. So I have like a bunch of decks, but even then, you can still only go so far with that. So I ended up going, I got all the sealed product, one of every pack, one of everything, one of all the posters, all that stuff. So for me, it really went into, my actual background is in marketing and market research. That's what I studied. My dad was a marketing professor. Marketing's just been like a big thing for me. So like print, and graphic design. So I went after a lot of the marketing material that Decipher put out for Star Wars CCG. So ads, sell sheets, different types of, prototypes for future sets and projects that they were working on. Anything really related to like the marketing of Star Wars CCG, I was very interested in collecting. So, I have a really large print catalog, if you will, of different Star Wars CCG stuff. And that's kind of where I've plateaued with my collection, in that a lot of that stuff is just so rare. Like the two people that were Decipher employees that would go to Gamma Trade Show every year had these things. Jim Colson has one, and who knows where the other one is. So it's me just begging Jim Colson like every other week for something new out of his collection. But at the end of the day, like even that has a shelf life. Like there will always be something new that pops up, that you're just like, yep, I don't have that one. Let me go get it. But then you get it, and it's like, okay, well now it's in my collection. So, going into the endless rabbit hole, I think you and I did a series of like getting into the game and how to play for beginners and stuff. And on one of the episodes, somebody posted on a YouTube comment, like, what do you suggest doing, going after Star Wars CCG or Lord of the Rings CCG? And Lord of the Rings CCG, man, that is a collector's dream. There's so much stuff for that game.
I think I did the count. There's 1,809 foils. Right?
Yeah, and there's like where Star Wars only has Japanese as an alternate language, like Lord of the Rings has like French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Polish.
There's one set that was printed in Mandarin, and it's like the golden goose if you can get the Mandarin set.
One Chinese set, there's probably some other sets, like some random promo card in Dutch or something like that, so like you can go after like tons of sets in all sorts of languages. So like I think once you kind of come to the end of collecting, in this case Star Wars CCG, which is what prompted this discussion, was like, where do you kind of go from there? The person who's going to be collecting hardcore, like you, like me, like Jim Colson, there's probably honestly like a deep down psychological problem. That's like an addiction, I think, honestly. And so like really just move on to the next thing, right? You've said finding subcultures of subcultures, right? Collecting autographs, or for me, looking at other games that I enjoyed playing, because a lot of it's nostalgia driven. So like I went deep into Versus System, but really I didn't play that much Lord of the Rings. I was into Magic at that time. So I don't really have I really like Tolkien, and I liked the first Peter Jackson movies, the Hobbit movies not so much, but like I tried the game out. Same with like Star Trek CCG, like Star Trek.
Star Trek is just like a little too much. It's like you're like
a game that I literally cannot wrap my head around. But
completely agree.
like I don't have any real nostalgia draw to either of those card games that would like make me want to like go onto the deep end of getting all 1,800 foils for Lord of the Rings, masterwork foils and all that stuff. But I'm interested in like other things. Like I love Star Wars. Star Wars is my favorite IP, favorite franchise, favorite, everything. I've got Star Wars glasses in my glass cabinet. I've got, a Star Wars dish. I've got Star Wars notebooks, and like, I bought into the resonant branding of Star Wars a long time ago. So, like I looked into the non-sport cards because I also like cards, right? I started collecting baseball cards when I was a kid, and that carried into CCGs. And basically, I've been doing cards and card games since like the late 80s, basically, right? And so for me, it was Topps non-sport Star Wars stuff, right? The vintage, I really like vintage things. So like the 1977 through 1983 Topps sets. Finding those things in really nice condition is incredibly hard because quality control at Topps in 1977, the guy must have been asleep on the job.
You know, going back to what you said earlier, I actually have also started gravitating towards making decks. Like, I just like the idea, even if no one will play with me, I really like the idea of having a Jedi Council Coruscant deck. And I've sort of started to build that because I think it's a fun thing to have, even if it's just, putting it in the double-sided sleeves and then they're double sleeving it and then putting it away and then it's just in a drawer. I like the idea that I have like 10 staple decks just in a drawer, ready to go just in case 9 other people come over and want to play a dead game. So I do think that that's sort of a fun pursuit because it also helps you feel like you're actualizing the cards, right? That these things that you've collected and you spent all this time curating, they have utility beyond just like looking at them. You're reminded that they are valuable because that there's this vibrant game that was played for 6 years and then there's still this community carrying it on. So I think that like creating decks when you've hit this point is actually a really interesting kind of approach to it, right? And maybe something that I want to do more of is build more kind of like classic decks. And I don't even have a Bring 'Em Before Me deck. You're showing yours off the other day. So I will say the other thing as well is this is sort of a macro commentary, but uh, finding community is so like what did I do when I hit the master stuff? Like, what if I did a YouTube channel? I talk about this crap pretty much is what coincided. Because it's partially to find community and to like help people get along the same journey. That's one of the things that's brought me joy in collecting is finding other people that share this fun, what I think is fun. Other people might think it's like incredibly strange that I'm like watching my mailbox like a hawk. Like I like the mail person. I'm just like I like see her walking down the block. I'm like, okay, like I don't want to be impatient, but like I'm expecting, $400 worth of cards in the mail, and it's supposed to be here today, and like looking through the blinds, right? And that's not normal behavior, right? But uh, I find like
psychological problem.
right, like, but like the mail day is like the closest that I get to recreating that feeling of being like 12 years old and like Christmas morning or whatever, right? Where you're getting this thing that you coveted, that you tracked and you paid for, and you went through all these steps. And I think that's really going back to like what drives collecting. That's a lot of it for me, right? It is this like treasure hunt a little bit, right? It's sifting through like 100 Facebook posts of people that just post like white border premiere collections to like the one where it's like, oh, this guy, I spotted a battle droid rifle in there. That means she has some Coruscant. Interesting. Tell me, like that to me is like the heart of the hunt and what makes this fun. I will say that has lessened with time, right? As I've become more exposed to the game more broadly and like a more like mature Star Wars collector, right? I'm just like, oh, I actually do have everything. Why don't I'm chasing more like goofy stuff at this point than I am anything else.
Very much the same. I think going into, going back to your idea of collecting autos, and then looking at Topps non-sport, Star Wars stuff and just like autos in general. Non-sport is, a really big, area, like on-card autos from like Star Wars Masterworks series. They're really nice, whether they're actually on card or they're on tape. But you can get autos from all sorts of people, voice actors, and the actual you could open up a triple signed Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, or Harrison Ford card, and it's $1 billion.
Yeah.
Signed by all three. You could also open up voice actor from Star Wars, Lego, Rise of Lego Vader, whatever.
I love that there's so much Lego Star Wars stuff. This conversation actually, this just reminds me. I think what this pipeline that I kind of described at the beginning of the video, right? At the end of the pipeline, I think there's also a lot of people that gravitate towards grading cards, right? Where it's not good enough to own every card. You need to own a card that is gem mint, and it needs to be gem mint in a way that somebody certifies that. And I have found that I've dipped my toes in the grading water, and I did a whole video where I said I was going to grade some stuff. I still haven't sent it in. Don't come at me, but you know, I think that that's like an outgrowth. And if I had to have a market prediction, I think that you're going to see a lot of people that come out of this pipeline, let's call them like the collector class of 2022, right? That all got started essentially what I did. And I've actually kind of like had a few other collectors that we've kind of had like a little like cadre of folks that we, I saw this thing and, what's a good price on this, AIs, blah, blah, blah. But I think that a bunch of people are going to graduate from that pipeline this year and say, okay, I have it all. What do I do now? Okay, I'm going to feed into the grading pipeline. I'm going to feed into the autograph pipeline, or maybe I'm going to feed into the pipeline of I'm going to sell all my stuff, right? I've gotten it all, and so it's a really interesting marketplace right now. Um, and I'm still kind of like wrestling with this question. Andy and I were talking kind of before the video. It's like, what are we going to talk about? Like, just see where this goes. Yeah, usually we have like a show notes and stuff. It's like, no, let's just kind of free flow because I think this is something we both wrestle with as people with large collections of cards that have been out of print for 20 years, 21 years now.
Yeah, I mean, grading it, and and I think you've had Cameron and Mark on your show, and I've been on their show, and grading's definitely an interesting crossroads for collecting. Obviously, for everything that you just said about like wanting to get gem mint, wanting to get the best grade, that's certified by a reputable source, PSA, BGS, SGC, something like that. And then being able to be like, I have a gem mint 10 Vader from Premiere, which is, congratulations to Mark for getting that, but it's like impossible to get out of Premiere because of centering and just every other issue that Premiere has. So like there is a hunt there for collecting. But like as far as like in the future of grading, there's a couple of things that I see. One, I really do believe that you're gonna end up in what's dubbed a quote unquote junk wax, but junk slab era of cards. Now, Star Wars CCG is probably a little bit insulated from this, and other things like Lord of the Rings or Star Trek CCG are also probably a little bit more immune to this, just because there isn't as many people grading as there are people grading, basketball or football or hockey cards or Pokemon, etc. But the amount of, PSA had to close down for like what, a year, just so they could clear like
Yeah.
million card backlog of cards that they had, or some like crazy amount of cards like that. And it's like there's going to be a lot of cards hitting the market, probably from about now. Like they closed in, I want to say like maybe like November or February.
Yeah, they just opened back.
February of 21 or something like that.
I'm with you here. Like I've wrestled with this a lot. Like I've bought a couple graded cards. It's usually in the form of an eBay auction. I just forgot I was the highest bidder, right? I just put in like, $50. So I end up being 46. Okay. But I am actually with you that I think that there is more cards being graded than there are buyers, right? And I just don't know, especially when you're looking at like sevens and eights, right? Like, would I want, like a guy actually asked me, he's like, hey, would you be interested in an eight Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight foil? I'm like, maybe a nine. I'd be like kind of interested. Like an eight's a weird one. Like not really.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's not a 9 or a 10, I'm not in. Not interested. Don't care at all. Unless
Yeah.
there's something like really bizarre. Like I have a 7 foil Grand Admiral Thrawn, except the label says that it's a Lord Vader from Reflections 2.
Yeah, it's fun. Whatever. It's a
It's
fun
like a
thing. Yeah,
printed graded card. So
yeah.
for me, that was kind of cool.
I think that happens a lot. I don't know if you've seen a lot of the Darth Maul Young Apprentice foils where it says Darth Maul wearing hoodie. It's like,
So it's like, for me, something like that is kind of interesting. But like, if it's just a legit card, like it's got to be a 9 or a 10, or I'm not going to be interested really in it. And, you know, even then, like a lot of the aesthetics of the way that the card looks in its slab is really important and to be honest, I hate the PSA label. I think PSA label just looks bad, like label maker from 2002. It just looks bad, so I prefer BGS. I like
yeah,
the engravings and like the metal plate and all of it. I just think it makes it look nicer. Same with like some company like HGA that does like custom labeling.
yeah. Actually,
Where
I,
they end up going, is one thing, but SGC is also interesting to me because I like the all black background that they use to like frame the card. So for me, I'm just not into PSA.
this is I think I agree. This is like HGA all black, and then this is one of my favorite ones. They did a custom where they did the label backwards.
Yeah. So
It's
like I like that kind of stuff. That looks nice. BGS looks really, I think, from an aesthetic look, it's just on another level than any of the other, you know, cards or companies that are grading cards. So I prefer BGS. But I think realistically, what you're probably going to see
BGS.
coming, yeah. See, I think it just looks nicer with like the engraved plate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that you have to take into consideration with grading is one, AI is going to get like really good at grading stuff, like really, really good. And probably like anything from before whatever company, whether it's PSA, BGS, SGC, or like a new upstart company that comes in with like really high end, like perfect AI grading on cards. Anything from before that was graded by a human is
There will be like this like stratification, right? Where like it's
biased.
pre.
And it's all going to be based off of serial numbers and stuff. And it's like, well, this serial number was, graded by one of the 100 extra graders that PSA brought in to clear their million card backlog. And how rigorous was the grading on this? When you've got some guy that's, been trained for 2 weeks grading your cards.
And also like this might be like his third Star Wars card that he's ever seen. I mean, especially these more obscure markets like Star Wars or any dead game. Like I think there's more coming in, but it's still not like Magic where this is the 150th Magic card of the week, right? That's come into this
The other
guy's.
thing I think, just as far as grading goes, and this won't happen with Star Wars CCG ever, obviously, because it's not new product, but the market's definitely going to go to, really high end. Like right now, you can buy like a box of football cards, and there's one pack in the whole box, and the box itself costs, like $5,000 or $10,000 because whatever you're going to open in there is going to be like some like beautiful like 4-color patch on auto Patrick Mahomes, card that like, okay, great. This is a really beautiful looking card, and that's what you're buying, right? And there's like, one pack, basically scratch off, right? It's gambling at that point because you either hit your $5,000 by scratching 3 diamonds, or you get like a $50 card because you didn't scratch 3 diamonds
Yeah.
off there, right? So, but I think where that actually ends up going is in box graded cards. So like from the factory, upper deck, tops, panini, whatever, they get the cards printed, grade it immediately, packaged, and then packaged into the box so that you're opening a sealed box that has an already graded card in it that's going to be a 10, a gem mint 10 with a 10 auto authentic, and like it's going to be a 4-color patch, and it's going to be
Oh, interesting.
so like if you're looking for things to do outside of, and this is wandered well into the philosophical region that we promised at the beginning of the show, is like, if you're looking for things to do outside, like you finished your collection, where do you go? You're going to start collecting graded cards. One, I'm worried about AI grading and anything that I'm buying now. Two, I think that the market of graded cards, one, is going to explode with a lot of junk slabs. And
Yep.
three, you're going to start getting stuff graded in box already. And that's just going to blow out, like sending your own submissions in. Like, why would you send in a submission of a card when you could just, like, you want the one that's graded, and they can designate it some way on the label, like factory graded or something like that. So
Yes, certified. Yeah, no, that those are really good points. I mean, I'll also say this: I don't get sports cards, right? Like I just like think that they're just so uninteresting to me. Like my parents, have sports cards, and they're like, "Do you want them?" I'm like, "No, I don't know what I would do with them." This sounds exhausting to go through like '90s baseball players, right? Like,
don't do that. Don't do like anything until basic, unless it's 1986 Fleer basketball.
see, that's what I mean. I just don't even. This is a market I just don't care about.
The next set you want to do is 2003 Topps basketball, so you can get a
See, I got to talk to Andy before I do anything. I mean, I think here's the thing, though. I do believe that one of the reasons why, like sports collectors, I think that market. I don't know a lot about it, but I read things that it seems like it is sort of oversaturated, and I think that there's interest from sports collectors to come into other games, and I think that you know Decipher products, because they're based on the movies and they look nice. There's a lot of potential for sort of like crossing over from a sports collector who just wants to have a couple Darth Mauls that are graded well, right? And that's just a thing he can like put on top of the mantle. So I think there's a lot of potential for that in the game. I mean, that's kind of outside of the sort of conversation today, but I do think you're going to see more sports collectors kind of wandering into these hobbies because they look good, right? The cards look really nice.
Definitely see that in other things that I collect. So Marvel. So kind of at the beginning of pandemic, I had a lot of free time because
It happens, yeah.
and I had a lot of just disposable money. I sold a lot of Magic cards. I just was like, I'm just gonna buy things that bring me a lot of joy, and one of those was Marvel cards, like the old Marvel Universe cards, Marvel Masterpieces, those things. Um, Upper Deck, and I'll say sports cards. Upper Deck produces Marvel cards. Topps produces Star Wars cards. Those companies, Topps, Upper Deck, Panini, they understand collecting and collectability like no one else. I mean, it's crazy. Wizards of the Coast is getting there with Magic, but man, like the numbered cards, one of tens, one of 25s, one of 50s, one of 99s, etc., like that. On card autos, alternate frame type stuff. Like, man, those companies they've got it. They really understand it. And what I've seen is, so I got into non-sport Marvel and Star Wars. I really like Marvel. I really like Star Wars. So I bought a bunch of sets of stuff. Luckily, it was all pre-spiking, so it worked out really well for me that I got in early, and I didn't have to spend $1 trillion to buy Marvel Masterpieces 2016 sets. But like the influx of people who were in sports that went into Pokemon, that went into Marvel, that are now going into Topps Star Wars is just insane. Like Star Wars Topps just launched as of, this is July 2022. So they just put out Topps Sapphire Chrome sets, which are like, I mean, there's that set is just like exploding, and it's really exploding because sports collectors are basically coming into it. And I think it's partially because sports cards are so crazy with pricing because of the collectability of them that it's literally just gambling at this point. It's like, oh great, you've got a you know a you know a PSA 10 Mike Trout card, fantastic. You've got $4.5 million, right? Like, you know,
So,
there's one of those in the world or something like that. But
yeah, yeah.
I follow like a few just because I'm interested in like collectible markets and like understanding collectibles as a whole, because it helps me understand trends that are going to happen within collectibles that I'm interested in and like where it ends up going, so I can stay ahead of markets and not spend $1 million and then kind of flip some things to make money to.
Yeah. The hobby fund. Yeah, I have the hobby fund.
um, I follow several big time sports cards collectors. I don't own any sports cards. No real interest in sports cards. If a 1951 Mickey Mantle fell on my lap, I'd probably do a dance and then retire. But it's like I joked with my wife at the beginning of the pandemic. I thought about just selling everything I own and buy either an Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man, or a 1951 Mickey Mantle rookie card. And I really just should have bought a 1951 Mickey Mantle. I literally should have just sold and liquidated everything I owned and bought a Mickey Mantle rookie card.
But you guys like renting, like you're like living in a hotel. It's like, no, we gotta like.
Mickey Mantle rookie card.
I mean, this is what like I tell people.
$1 million.
I was literally like at the bar last night. I was talking to some friends like, "Oh, you do this YouTube thing? What do you even do? Like, are you talking about cards, like toys?" I'm like, "All right." So I've spent a lot of money over COVID, and I think the money I've spent on collectibles has performed better than any of your stocks.
Yep, absolutely.
But by like a magnitude, and they're just like, "Oh, I guess I didn't think about it that way." I'm like, right, because like, and these collectibles hold up because you have. I mean, first off, I think something else. As you were talking, the collector DNA never goes away. Even in the case of like, let's go back to Bjorn, who got it all and then sold it. I guarantee he's collecting something else, right? It's like I'm selling my Star Wars collection so I then can get into Magic, right? Or like you see this narrative all the time, like that DNA stays with you for life. You're gonna be a hoarder or whatever. You're gonna just, even if you move on from one hobby to another, like you're still gonna have the same characteristics fundamentally. And so I think that the collectible market's solid because you have this group of people that finish stuff and they just start something new, right? And that's like this cycle that's going to continue. And I think for games like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, these like some of the well-produced like early gen CCGs that like have done well, like they're going to see more collectors, sports collectors going. They're just like, it's only $300 for a card. That's 1/100th what I expected.
Caution this though with that Star Wars CCG, Lord of the Rings, and probably Star Trek. Maybe something like Versus System as well. They have very resilient IPs, right? Like
Yes.
Star Wars is 50 years old, roughly 45. Marvel's 80 years old. Lord of the Rings is basically 20, even though it's been around since when it was published.
Yeah, yeah.
But really kickstart with the movies in the early 2000s. But all of that, like, it's funny. There's a friend of the channel and friend of ours, Kyle Mullins, who does a bunch of recently pack to grade videos.
Yeah.
Speaking of grading, I actually met him in person as we were doing a little bit of a swap for some things that he was passing through my area and stopped, and he was talking about his looking at his YouTube metrics, and I'm pretty sure you can probably corroborate this story looking at your YouTube metrics. It's like 99% like white men who are like in the 30 or 35 to 49 demographic. They're 99% from the United States and 0.9% from Canada and 0.1% from the rest of the world.
I got a guy from Finland, so I don't know if you're listening right now, Finnish guy. I thank you for listening.
Right into the comment section below.
Please comment something cool.
Smash that like button, and tell us where you're from. And
that's a good bit people do on this stuff. So smash the like and flood the comments.
I'm pretty sure it's like all people within that demographic. Like
you're 100% correct. Yeah,
women, next to no people like under the age of like 30, next to no people over like the age of like 50, right? You know, exceptions, one-offs here and there, but that's also just the demographic of Star Wars CCG, because this is the people who were, you know, 12 to 20 years old when that game was hitting shelves, right? And so as you move out to the next cycle of nostalgia, which I'm going to say is it's a really weird thing in my collecting mind, which I know we're running out of time here, but I really want to touch on really quick.
Sure. I'll give you 2 minutes. Go.
It might take longer than 2 minutes, but probably is Harry Potter as a big franchise, because that was like 2000. That was like 2001 through like 2011 or something like that. And so
yeah,
we're like 10 years old in like 2017, in like 2007.
I think that there's a difference.
Are probably going to be hitting their like, you know, if you were 10 in 2017, you're 25 now. So you're going to be just coasting into your nostalgia peak. Same with WoW TCG. Man, if you can get a unscratched Spectral Loot Tiger, whatever that is, Spectral Tiger unscratched loot card, you can just go for it. Literally just go for it. The card's probably poised to just jump. And I know in like 2 years, I'm just going to be kicking myself for not having bought one for like $4,000 right now, because it's going to be like so much more. But literally my tip of the day, buy a Spectral Tiger card unscratched. Go. Oh, that's another thing with graded cards. As you moved into card games that had digital assets, Maple Story, WoW TCG, I think the G.I. Joe card game, some other card games, they had like scratches. Like you could either redeem things or if you're grading something, how do you grade that? Is like if you scratched it off.
Interesting.
If the card itself is basically gem mint, centering, edges, corners, the surface is a 0, right?
Because you use a coin to scratch something off.
Scratch off. Or like if you redeemed the code on a card, how does that factor into the grading of it? Because there's like another dimension of like the usefulness of the card in terms of grading versus, you know, so I think there's some discussion to have there of things, but you know, more to the point is if things kind of follow 20-year cycles, right? Like, and I really think it's like maybe the end of Gen X through like early millennials, or like maybe even like late stage millennials, like that really hit with collecting. One from like commercialized cartoons of the 70s and 80s through till like essentially the digital revolution of people who were born between like 93 and like 97, right? And they hit they're like 10 years old, because like, you know, Scott Church on one of your recent videos and just in general, people are aware that like you market to like middle school kids who are like 10 to like 14. And that's like the music you listen to, the things you like I was 10 years old when I first saw Star Wars. I love Star Wars to this day, right? Same thing with music, same thing with all the things that I really enjoy and like were pretty much all formulated in those years. So if you're like 10 to 14 between like 97, like 2007 and like 2011, like in 20 years from now, you're probably the last generation that has essentially non-digital natives collecting things, right? Like before Gen X is your like parents' generation. What are you collecting? Like Elvis memorabilia, Howdy Doody,
trains, like it's like precious moments.
Yeah, like exactly, like, and like, you know, what your parents probably had like two toys, like a Lionel train and like a Howdy Doody horse stick that you like ride around, pretend it's a horse or something. Like collecting just like wasn't a thing in like the 50s and like early 60s until you start getting into like the late 60s, early 70s with commercialized television, He-Man, Transformers. I guess I know that's like more like 80s, but like maybe like a little bit before that, like Hanna-Barbera. That's also when you start first seeing the first like branding characters of like Ronald McDonald and the Hamburglar and like, you know, Happy Meals and all like that stuff's just baked into like 70s through like 90s culture. And like we lived that. But once you start getting past this like age demographic that's like from like born like probably like around like the turn of the millennium, like 2000 or like 2002, 2003, like kids who are born then who are now hitting their like they're like about 20 years old now. So 10 years from now, when they would be going into their cycle of starting to collect nostalgia things, all their nostalgia things are all digital assets, right? They're all loot boxes. They're all Clash of Clans and whatever else was popular in 2012. That's all
Yeah,
Android Candy Crush and like all that. Like you, you don't have a physical thing the way that like you and I have a physical thing, which is like a card game, an action figure, or something. Like I completely missed the boat on Kenner action figures for Star Wars, and I'm priced out of that collectible at this point. Like the 1977 to 1985 Kenner stuff, I would love to have it. I'm not even going to come close to touching that stuff unless I sold my entire Star Wars CCG collection. But that generation just really doesn't have anything, I think, because they're everything was just digital loot boxes, right?
yeah,
And it compounds now. So like my nephew, who was born in 2012, he loves Fortnite. And there's nothing like I mean, there's you go to GameStop and there's probably some stupid Funko Pop or like Nerf gun that you can buy, but like that's not the same type of collecting that I feel like we did. And not to be like an old crotchety man looking down on a generation. It's just a difference in collecting in that the Star Wars CCG, the Lord of the Rings, the Star Trek, this stuff, there's a death spiral on that at the end where there's no future generation that's going to pick that up. Like tops, like Kenner 80, 77 through 85, tops 77 through 83 cards, sports cards get a refresh every year, that type of stuff. There's this like Magic continues to grow, but if Magic at some point stops, that'll also have a death spiral, right? Like at some point, there's just not going to be anybody who even knows about this stuff. So like right now, I feel is like the golden age for like dead CCGs. But like if you look at the history of CCGs, like you get Magic and you get all this stuff that comes out in the 90s, Middle Earth and Guardians of the
mhm.
whatever and Wildstorm cards and Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff. You get into the early 2000s, Lord of the Rings versus System, WoW, TCG, Despoils, etc. By the time you get to like 2008, 2009, like there's really nothing left. It's Magic, and then there's like Force of Will card game, which somehow is still going. I don't even know how, but like you really just don't have another card game that comes onto market until you get to Flesh and Blood in 2019, 2020. And I'll just tell you that game is just not for me. I
We can have a longer discussion about
spend a
Flesh and
ton of
Blood.
money on that, but I just don't care for that game. But you have this like 10-year gap in CCGs where there's just basically nothing but Magic. Like I've never met a person that has ever played Pokemon. So I'm sure there were Pokemon set releases during that time that are going to be like $1 million, but that was just Magic at that time. You know, I went to a lot of card game stores over that
So
period. So I don't think that there's like this this group that like plays and remembers card games and like is going to be the collector of card games that are going to go back to 90s card games.
No, I think you make a lot of really interesting points. Like a couple thoughts, real quick. That the demographics you mentioned, right? That 30 to 50, there will be a death spiral, but it will be in 35 years, right? Like if I'm looking at this from like what is the near term or even midterm, I feel pretty good for the next 15 years, right? Because like those folks are going to be alive, hopefully, for much longer. And thinking about sort of this Gen Z, like what will they collect? I think that this is actually a market I like kind of observed because I randomly found my PlayStation 2 games, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. Like they will collect video games, right? Like they have been like having positive experience with, PS3, PS4 games. Like those, like we'll start to see a spike maybe in 10 years, right? Like if that's what you want to get into, like that'll be the thing they want to own. Like and as things continue to move digital, there's still going to always be like an angle for it. I mean, Magic. I guess I look at that and I think that there's always going to. If I go into like the local game store here, it is more packed than it's ever been with card games, right? Like, there's no Yu-Gi-Oh scene here, but there's a pretty big Magic and a pretty big Pokemon scene. Like Saturday, I go in and there's lots of little kids playing Pokemon, and so I don't know what that means. That's totally anecdotal. I think that there will always be, it may not be cards, but there will be physical things that we want to collect in this capitalist America, right? Maybe it'll be video games. Maybe it'll be like, they just decide to go right to cars or they go right to, whatever it is. People in America, this is my final thoughts. People in America like stuff. We're a country of stuff. And no matter how much like this, like nomad aesthetic is peddled at people where like you should just live in a van with like one blanket and like a hat, like that is not actually like a lifestyle that most people want to live, nor is that like the broader like American dream. Like the American dream is to have a basement full of crap, right? Like that is actually what that means. And so I think that like things may change from CCGs, and it's interesting to like kind of talk about that like empty period, but people will still collect crap. I actually randomly was looking through the PlayStation stuff. I played Silent Hill, right? And I don't know if you knew this, but the Silent Hill games are worth a ton. For whatever reason, it's just a niche. I was like looking, I was like, do I have $1,000 in Silent Hill games from like one, two, three? I think I have up to three. I was like, wait, these are actually like several $100s each. But and I think that like that's something that'll like continue to like grow like the video game, and I think you see it right now with like NES, Super Nintendo, but PlayStation is right there, sort of poised for like growth. But anyways, that's sort of like my closing. We're going to continue to hoard stuff. It'll be different types of stuff, but as a collector, I'm happy to have completed my Star Wars journey. And I think I'm just gonna keep on buying different aspects of it. But I will say I'm slowing down on buying. I'm like more like meditative at this point than I am as far as like trying to buy actively. It feels like I'm more just like enjoying the cards I have, trying to build decks and sort of craft different strategies than I am like looking to buy more cards on eBay. Essentially retired the eBay account.
Yeah, I think to close out some of my thoughts here is, I definitely agree that there's always going to be something new to collect. Specific to 90 CCGs, I think that, there's a generation, probably our generation, that will continue to buy into those. But I don't necessarily think they have, say, the long-term staying power that stuff like original Kenner Star Wars figures have, Gen 1 Transformers.
So with the original, this is actually, I think, one of the things, like if you talk to like Gen Z folks, like there's interesting data, like they freaking love the prequel trilogies, right? Like Phantom Menace is, I think there's like a whole group of people that like look at the original trilogies like, I don't really care about any of these characters very much, right? And so I could see a world where like those toys, like there just aren't enough people that are interested in like a generation about those sort of toys.
Sure. But I think I'll say I think that the original Star Wars Kenner figures probably have a longer lifespan than Star Wars CCG.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Will not disagree there.
I think that there's always going to be something to collect. Um, I think it's about really it's about broadening your horizons of different markets. So like I said, I follow a bunch of sports card collectors on Instagram and on YouTube. I watch a lot of content about it. I don't collect sports cards, but it helps me understand that market and where people are trying to put their money. And it helps me stay a little bit ahead of the game as far as the collecting aspects. I think it's really looking at what you know at the end of the day what really brings you happiness. It is having
Yeah.
a basement full of junk, and it's I will agree. I really slowed down my overall collecting and purchasing of anything, similar to you have to what you have done. And it sounds trite to say maybe, but it's more about at this point the friends that you've met along the way that are the real win there. So
Yeah.
the people that I have daily chats with about, all sorts of stuff, whether that's, you or Cameron, Mark, Brian, Fred, Jim Colson, Julian in Norway, Bjorn, Sweden, etc. Like, I just, and people in like other collectible hobbies that I do that I chat with. It's like, I talk to these people like all the time. I've literally never met any of you in person except for Kyle Mullins, who's like newcomer. I actually met
That's the most random one. Yeah.
yesterday. So it's really random, but it's like, at a point, it's like you go into collectible, but you come out with a community. And I think
Yeah.
that's really the biggest takeaway that I have of where do you end collecting? Yeah, you're going to get everything, but you never really leave the community that you were collecting with, unless you just sell out and move on with your life. But
Yep.
I think that that's probably not something that I'll do. So I think that's where I'll probably end it. It's enjoy the community that forms around a mutual, extremely niche market, and uh, just have fun doing it in these crazy years that we've been having since the world. I think the world probably like reset, and like we were actually all supposed to die in the Mayan calendar in like 2012, but like somehow like Bruce Willis or somebody like stopped it, and like
Like Deep
they didn't
Impact.
have a plan for it, so they're just like throwing all the really bad like fan fiction sequels at us, and like every year is just like progressively worse than the year before until like Bruce Willis comes back and saves us all at the end or something.
No, I hope that happens.
Like 2016 through like 2022, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, I really think we live on like one of the strangest versions of Earth where, like I think my most valuable asset, like worth much more than like my car, is like small pieces of cardboard that I covet. So I think my final thought is enjoy the journey of collecting. It's a lot of fun. That is also meditative and it is relaxing, and it has been the most fun I've had over the last 2 years is to find some of this stuff and to put it into a collection. And for folks just starting this journey, I don't know if anyone made it to like, minute 65 that just started collecting. It's a fun journey. It has been a really great hobby, and I'm happy to kind of continue doing it with this channel. So, Andy, thank you so much for listening to me just chatter about cards, and this has just been awesome. Really great exchange of ideas, and always happy to have you on the channel.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Hopefully, I can come back and I haven't overextended my welcome of like 8 weeks in a row of content from me.
No, people like you. People demand more Andy Talaga. So,
So if you demand Andy Talaga, hit that like button and
that like and subscribe, right? Yeah.
comment that says I like Andy Talaga. If you've made it to 1 hour and 10 minutes in, Leave a comment says I love Andy Talaga, and I'll if you're in the U.S. I'll send you a random card from my collection.
Okay, that's a promise, and it's been made here, minute 110.
There you go.
All right, we'll see everybody.
All right, see you.